Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is June 23rd, 2024, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? And we'll start with Russia again because the Ukrainians struck a very important command center of the Russian Motorized Rifle Regiment in Belgorod. So that is in the village of Nekhotievka, which is very close to the border with Ukraine, so a few kilometers away. So you can see that, again, the Ukrainians since early May have been given the green light by the United States to utilize HIMARS missiles and other perhaps American weapons to strike military installations within a limited range. I think the range right now, the possible range is about 50 kilometers, more or less, especially with the HIMARS missiles. And so the Ukrainians are really utilizing this to the maximum, and they have been hitting several military installations within Belgorod specifically, because this is where the Russians are launching multiple offensives, not only in Kharkiv, which has failed because the Russians essentially only built a small buffer zone of about 5 kilometers max, but also in Luhansk. So overall, this is good news. It will weaken the Russian logistics furthermore and the command of its troops. We have seen in the last few weeks that the Russians, their logistics are terrible in Kharkiv especially. They're using these Scooby-Doo vans to transport fuel, water, etc., and the Ukrainians have been targeting them. And I believe that by the end of the summer, if the Ukrainians continue with this pressure, the Russians will not have a choice but to leave the Kharkiv sector, which will be a huge win and morale boost for the Ukrainians. I think this is possible as long as the Ukrainians continue receiving weapons and are permitted as well to strike further and further within Russia. And I'll speak about this topic at the end of the video. And also, a last little note is that a Panzer S1 system was destroyed in close to the Belgorod city of Belgorod yesterday. So another very expensive air defense system which was shut down, which will allow the Ukrainians to fly their drones and hitting whether it be oil depots, refineries, gas terminals, or other plants, military plants that the Russians are using for the war effort. Overall, great news. And speaking of other military installations, so the Ukrainians used ATACMS today in Sevastopol to destroy, or at the very least damage, a Russian air defense system and radar complex. As you can see here, the Russians, it appears, have started using far more public spaces and civilian spaces to set up their air defense systems and other military installations, fully knowing that this will reduce the likelihood of the Ukrainians hitting them. And so, unfortunately, and I do say unfortunately because I never support deaths of civilians, even if they support the Russian war effort in Ukraine, but there's a few people that were injured, I should say 100, over 100, so not a few, and 5 people killed as a result of that. However, I must say one thing is that the people that were venturing on those beaches and relaxing, they know what's going on right beside. They know that there's a full war going on. It's not the first time that Crimea was struck with Ukrainian missiles to destroy air defense systems, etc. And only a fool will go on vacation to Crimea fully knowing all these facts. And also, as you can see here, the Russians setting up these military installations right beside the beach, right? If I was to see that, I would say, hell no, I'm leaving this place, right? But not the Russians. And so this is entirely on Russia, right? They have jeopardized the civilian lives by setting up these systems right beside, and the Ukrainians don't have a choice but to destroy them because they're helping the Russians commit terrorist attacks in Ukraine. Just look at what happened yesterday in Kharkiv, where the Russians just conducted a pure terrorist operation and struck downtown Kharkiv, killing several Ukrainian people and injuring hundreds. Just a pure terrorist operation, and these radar systems are helping the Russians conduct these terrorist attacks in Ukraine, whether it be in Odessa, Zaporizhia, Dnipropetrovsk, or Kyiv, Kharkiv. The Russians will continue doing that, and they will be cheerful, unfortunately. So, just some food for thought here. And last but not least, I talked a little bit briefly about the limitations given to the Ukrainians to strike Russian territory, and here the Institute for the Study of War confirms that the Russian forces are exploiting the sanctuary that the US policy still protects to support Russian combat operations in northern Kharkiv Oblast, meaning that 84% of Russian air defenses are still shielded because the US refuses to allow Ukraine to use the ATACMS deeper within Russian territory. Right now, the Ukrainians are limited at using HIMARS missiles, but outside of that, they cannot use the ATACMS to strike key military installations. And you can see that there's several airfields outside of that kind of zone that the Ukrainians can strike, which imagine if the Ukrainians would be able to use ATACMS and destroy dozens of jet fighters within a few days. That would be a huge blow for the Russian Air Force. And also by default, also destroying air defense systems that are present in these airfields, which have allowed essentially the Russians to fly safely and dump their glide bombs, because they continue to dump their glide bombs, such as what happened in Kharkiv yesterday. And they will continue to do that because they have the safe haven that is a result of this Biden administration and their, escalation management policy. And I hope that by the end of this summer, they will fully remove this limitation, because yes, the United States has been a huge partner, the most valuable partner for Ukraine in its support, whether it be military or financial. But also, are they that committed? Is the Biden administration that committed for Ukraine's victory when you're limiting its success? Right? This decision could have been made years ago, and this would have decimated the Russian war effort in Ukraine. And only now, 2.5 years, a little bit less, following the beginning of this conflict, and we see that we're still talking about this, right? A common sense decision. So unfortunately, that's the situation. So let me know what you guys think about any of the news that I covered today. Huge thank you for support for this channel and the cause, the Ukrainian cause, and I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!